Right, I'm with Alan Collins, who's an English lawyer, solicitor, barrister.
Solicitor advocate, which is a cross of the two.
All right, and you work for a large firm in England?
That's right, Pannone.
And you're specialising in abuse cases, child abuse cases.
Yes, yeah.
And you're representing in Jersey quite a few people who are
50-odd victims of the Haut-de-Garenne case.
In general cases, how is that going, that case?
Well, after many years, it seems, of fighting, we have a redress scheme in place which is designed to compensate the victims of child abuse here in Jersey.
Compared with other places, how different has it been dealing with Jersey?
In my experience, rightly or wrongly, it has taken a lot longer to get to this position. This case has been difficult because we have been dealing with victims who are not only living in Jersey but in England, Australia and other countries. It has been frustrating at times because one would have thought, given the criminal process, that it would have been easier to have had a compensation scheme in place a lot earlier than now.
The local lawyers haven't been very active in pursuing this case. Does that surprise you?
It strikes me as curious that many of the Jersey victims had to seek help from my firm in order to get the representation that they needed. So this in itself was quite a challenge for me, but I've been delighted to assist them and to
Has it been difficult for you as an outside lawyer to get to grips with Jersey law? Has that been a problem?
Not really, no. I think the challenge has been to try and force these cases through. It became apparent very early on that there had been widespread and deep-seated abuse of children at Haut-de-Garenne, and so it has been frustrating as well as a challenge to push the cases through against that background.
A naive person like myself might think that a small community like Jersey, when there's cases of abuse made known, that the society would deal with it immediately and quickly, but it seems to work the opposite way.
That is a fair comment, I think. I don't believe that anyone has benefited from the fact that it has taken such a long time to get these cases processed, and indeed many of them are still yet to be processed. Because
the terms of reference for the compensation schemes from 1940, I believe.
The period is approximately 1945, the day of liberation in May 1945, down to recent times. So we are covering a very lengthy time period.
One very interesting aspect of it was at one stage there was hint that cases might be going to English courts to be heard, which is rather constitutionally rather unusual.
Well, from my perspective, not unusual, because child abuse knows no boundaries, and many victims, I think certainly in respect of the people that I represent, the majority don't live on Jersey anymore. They've moved abroad, and as I said, child abuse knows no boundaries. The consequences of what happened here basically got exported to England and Australia and other countries. And many of the victims have lived in, whether it's Australia or England, for many, many years. And what they have continued to suffer has happened in those places, in those jurisdictions. And so the law recognises in England that fact, and appropriate cases can be brought in other jurisdictions. And so there was no reason, in my opinion, why some of these cases could not be dealt with in an English court.
Is that an issue you've discussed with Jersey lawyers, the fact that you're trying to bring cases in London?
Yes.
What would they think about that?
Let's put it this way, I'm sure you can work out for yourself what the reaction may well have been to that, and maybe you want to do an additional programme with them.
Do you think it might have established precedents for the future?
There's always that possibility, although my argument would be that the law is pretty well fixed on cases that can be brought in other jurisdictions.
Mm.
So I don't think we would necessarily have been breaking new law. That's my opinion anyway.
Because again, what strikes me is, as an English lawyer, you've had no difficulty dealing with Jersey law, and Jersey lawyers have a monopoly. You're treading on very sensitive ground, don't you?
Well, as I sort of indicated before, child abuse knows no boundaries, and what happened here was as wrong as it had happened in England or Australia. The law is basically the same. That's really, I don't think, the issue, and for anyone to suggest that it was some kind of issue, I think they'd be wrong. My opinion is that it was a crime here, it was a wrong here, in just the same way as it would have been in England or New South Wales.
But the other party in this case is the States of Jersey, isn't it? In all these cases, they're answering for all. They're paying the compensation that's payable.
That is, they're the ones who've created the scheme to compensate the victims.
But the victims have to have been victims by being in care of a state.
In the States of Jersey, yeah, between the 1945 start point and the latter cut-off point.
Have you had because you're an English solicitor, English lawyer, have you had any discussions with the English government about what went on here?
I have had meetings with English MPs, and the same way as I sought advice from the Western Australian government, which established a redress scheme in Western Australia for the victims of child abuse, primarily in Catholic-run children's homes in that state. So I've consulted, I think, far and wide on this case.
You've been dealing with the Jersey case for several years now. How many cases did you have in the beginning, and how many have you got now?
Started off with one, and now it's well over 50.
And still growing, still fresh cases coming to you, or is it now more or less?
I think it's more. I think we've reached the end point on numbers, as far as I'm aware.
There's been rumblings, and it's been going backwards and forwards and being kicked around about an inquiry to take place. Have you had any discussions about the inquiry that is promised?
Well, my opinion is, for what it's worth, is that if there is going to be an inquiry, then I'm sure the States of Jersey will want to make sure that it's a full inquiry, and that the parameters of it are set to reflect what occurred, and for that to happen there needs to be wide consultation. My concern is that perhaps there has not been the consultation that I think there ought to have been, and therefore the concern on my part is that the victims will not necessarily get the inquiry that perhaps they deserve.
If there was to be an inquiry, what could it actually do? And ideally, what could it do? Apart from reveal information about things that happened a long time ago, but what could it realistically do for the future?
I think the victims must have the opportunity to tell their stories, and to be able to tell their stories without any kind of duress. I believe the victims will want to make sure that lessons are learned, that if there have been shortcomings, that they are exposed and lessons learned from that, that those shortcomings concern not only the police investigation, but also the management of Hodegren and any other children's homes involved as well. For me, makes no difference whether there's an inquiry or not. I just want to make sure that for the victims, that they've been told that there's going to be an inquiry, and having been told that there's going to be an inquiry, that their wishes and needs are fully considered, and that there are no shortcuts for expediency, if I can put it like that.
You've got big experience in this area with children. Do you have experience in other areas with abuse? Because almost weekly we hear of an abuse in an old person's home or a mental institution of some sort. It seems to be epidemic proportions.
Whether there's more abuse now than there was in the past is impossible to say. It is still a taboo subject, but not the taboo subject that perhaps it was 10 years ago, where no one dare mention the term child abuse or elder abuse or abuse generally. It just wasn't spoken about. I believe that we probably only ever see the tip of the iceberg. Victims are usually vulnerable children or people in the first place, so they're at a disadvantage, and it is very difficult for victims to come forward. There's a lot more support out there now than there was in the past, so that's good, that's a good thing. It is good that, for example, in this particular case, the states of Jersey are hopefully doing the right thing by the victims, so that's good. The states of Jersey, provided they follow through what it is said that it's going to do, deserve a slap on the back, provided, of course, they follow through what they said to the victims that they're going to do. If they didn't, then that would be a tragedy, but I'm sure that's not going to happen. I've come across many cases over the years. There's lots of similar scenarios, people in a position of authority abusing that authority either to abuse children or to allow it to be covered up in one form or another. And that is sadly still prevalent today, and that is going to be the challenge for the future, to try and ensure as best as possible that the risk to vulnerable people, whether they're elderly people or children, that risk of being abused is minimised as far as possible.
On an everyday basis, if you've got any suggestions how it might be reduced, the amount of abuse that takes place, obviously the more closed the institution, obviously prisons, abuse takes place, and children's home where it's closed doors, how can it be stopped?
By victims being encouraged to come forward to talk about what's happened, and also by recognising that people are abused often by people that they actually know. It's not some mysterious stranger hiding behind a bush. That everyone's always brought up not to take sweets from strangers and all the rest of it, which may well be fine and good advice and all the rest of it. But the risks are always from people that are known to the child or to the victim. And I think it's appreciating that risk and recognising that abuse can take place in any set of circumstances. It's being alive to that. It doesn't mean going overboard, because that's counterproductive in its own way. It's being alive to that fact that this happens, and recognising that children have to be taught about dangers and risks, and also by ensuring that people can speak out, and when something is mentioned or said, for it not to be brushed under the carpet, which is something that we're only too familiar with, that something is said but the child is ignored. And I think as all adults have to realise that if something unusual is said, but it isn't ignored. And it's only by educating ourselves and children that the risk can be minimised. That's my view for what it's worth.
I don't suppose anybody's invited you back to Jersey to give some talks on these matters, have we?
No.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.